Hello, my name is Ashley and I work at the Williamsburg Branch Library. I'm here to share the Morse code jewelry demo with you today. Discover how to use this code to make your own message in jewelry and discover a little bit about Morse code along the way. Samuel Morse was the inventor of Morse code, but not too many people know the tragic story that might be behind the invention. He is, of course, the gentleman in the middle. In 1825 in Washington, D.C., Samuel Morse was completing a portrait of the Marquis de Lafayette, hero of the American Revolution. The Lafayette portrait was one of the most sought-after painting commissions in the United States because it paid a cool $1,000, which is almost $23,000 today. The painting of the man with the dramatic background is the completed portrait by Morse. Morse had accepted the commission and gone on the long journey because his family of 4 desperately needed the money. While there, he received a letter informing him that his pregnant wife, Lucretia, had been feeling ill. He had immediately penned a reply, wishing her a quick recovery, sending his love, and promising that he would return home as soon as possible. Now remember, back then, messages were only sent by mail and took days to get to where they were going. The next letter he received was from his father, and it told him that his wife had passed away unexpectedly thanks to an affliction of the heart. She was only 25 years old. The portrait in the bottom there is a picture of Lucretia and their 2 oldest children. By the time Morse made it back to his home, thanks to the delay of the mail, his beloved wife was already buried. He never got to say goodbye to her. Shortly after her death is when he began to obsess over a way to use electricity to send messages. If that technology had existed, maybe he could have at least been there for the funeral and said goodbye. After that, Morse still painted, but only for the income. He was focused solely on electric telegraphy. In 1831, he developed the most effective method of electric communication possible, a single-wire rhythmic transmitter which sent messages based on pulses tapped out by hand. The code used by the invention was a series of long and short electrical pulses, which became known as Morse code. He actually wasn't the first to patent a telegraph, but his was the cheapest and the most effective, so it's the one that lasted. Unfortunately, Morse was a controversial man, especially when looking back with modern eyes. He held a lot of terrible sentiments that weren't uncommon at the time, but they were still awful, so he isn't celebrated too often as an inventor anymore. Even so, his invention made an impact and is still in use today, and no matter what else you say about the man, he loved his wife. Morse code is a system of encoding letters via a series of dots and dashes. These represent the long and short electric bursts through the telegraph machines. I'm going to play a sample message for you. Just listen the first time, then it will play again, and I want you to try and decode it. A long sound is a dash, and a short sound is a dot. There's a little pause after the second playback so you can try to have it down correctly, but be sure to pause and go back if you really want to get the word decoded. If you're unable to figure it out and curious, just wait because the answer will eventually be revealed. The answer is books. Dash, dot, dot, dot for B, dash, dash, dash for O, dash, dash, dash for O, dash, dot, dash for K, and dot, dot, dot for S. Did you get it right? I hope you had some fun trying, even if your answer wasn't quite right. And just imagine, when they originally sent these, the messages went much faster. Materials needed. These are the supplies that I used when creating a bracelet and a pair of earrings. First of all, you need the International Morse Code Translator. I recommend that you go back to one of the points in the video where I show it and pause the screen, or you can always search online. Flat nose pliers, scrap paper and a pencil so you can write out your message, 12 inches of ribbon to measure your wrist, permanent marker to mark the ribbon, a ruler. If you have a flexible fabric ruler, you don't actually need the ribbon and marker. Seed beads, bugle beads, and round spacers. If you don't have these at your house, a small bead to represent the dots and a larger one for the dashes and something else to represent the spacers would also work. What you have at home might differ from mine, but the process will still be the same, and I'm sure it'll still look lovely. With that said, it's hard to tell you how many of these beads you need because it will vary depending on your message and the beads that you use. I will tell you that I had 25 3mm spacers and 8 grams of seed beads and 4 grams of bugle beads and had way more than enough. 12 inches of beading wire for the bracelet to hopefully give you some room for error. 6 inches of beading wire for each earring does the same. 6 crimp beads. 2 of these are for the bracelet and 4 are for the earrings. A pair of ear wires, a clasp, and if you'd like, 2 jump rings for the earrings. I'll show you what the earrings look like both with and without, and an optional jump ring for the clasp. How does this translate to jewelry? We're going to use Morse code to create your own message that you can wear. The small seed beads are dots and the bugle beads are dashes. The rounds are spaces between each letter. Make sure you start and end with a silver spacer. See how the 2 teal seed beads are equal to the 2 dots below it? In Morse code, 2 dots equal out to the letter I. After that, we have a spacer for a space, and then there is another seed bead for a dot, a bugle for a dash, and 2 more seed beads for dots for the letter L. I went through and had this spelled out so that you can see how I created the sample message. Obviously, if you are using something other than seed beads and bugle beads, yours might look a little different, but the process will still be the same. I recommend that you use the Morse code translator to write out your message in Morse code before you start to bead. That way you have everything ready in front of you. So first we want to measure our wrists. First, you wrap your ribbon around your wrist and mark it where it meets the starting point. Measure that with a ruler to discover your wrist size. You'll note that I got a little marker on my thumbnail. That's just usual for me. If you have a soft ribbon ruler like used for sewing, then go ahead and use that. I didn't use mine, so I could demonstrate how to do this for those of you who only have an old school ruler or are using one on a device. If you add another inch to whatever that number was, that will be the total length of your bracelet from end to end, including the clasp when you've finished. We want to secure our stringing wire, so I measured an inch away from the end, and then I took my clamp and went ahead and fastened that right on there. Now there are specific beading clamps that you can use, or in a pinch, sorry for the pun, you can even use a binder clip. You just need something that'll keep your beads on your wire so they don't all fall off. I've had that happen and it isn't any fun. Hooray, it's time to string your bracelet. This is the part where we actually get to make some jewelry. It's helpful if you have your Morse code message written out in dots and dashes on a separate piece of paper with a backslash between letters or numbers. You can also choose to put your backslash, which represents the round spacers you'll put on your bracelet, in between words. It's personal preference. I chose between each letter in my samples. Now for the actual stringing. As you can see, I sped mine up quite a bit. Go on and use Morse code to spell out your message using your bugle beads, seed beads, and rounds, or whatever it is you're using for your dots, dashes, and spaces. And keep on stringing. At this point, obviously, I am not yet attaching a clasp. You want to make sure that you keep the clamp at the end of your bracelet and just keep stringing till the end. At the end of stringing, you're going to measure your message and prepare to do a little math if you have to. I was lucky though, and my message was the right length. If yours isn't, I'll tell you what to do in a moment. So pick up your crimp bead and then place it on your wire. Then you're going to pick up your clasp. My clasp has a jump ring attached to it. It's up to you whether you have one or not. Then loop the end of your wire back through the crimp bead. This might take you a moment. It definitely took me more than a few moments to try to get the end through because these are tiny beads. Then you're going to eyeball your loop. Mine's pretty big, so I tugged down carefully and made it smaller, double checked, and then picked up the flat nose pliers and flattened the crimp. Now, I did this at the end where my message ended. It's up to you which end you add the clasp. And then to finish it off, I went ahead and trimmed the excess wire. What does mine say? Curry and Hayes, the names of my 2 cats. Because this is the first end we're working on, you have some leeway to not worry about having the beads right up against the crimp. As you can see, I have plenty of space between them and the seed beads. If you have a 7-inch wrist and your message is 5 inches, you still need 2 inches of beads. So you could add an inch of beads to either side to make it 7 inches. You could do this by filling in with spacers or a single color of beads, or you could leave your message the length that it is and just make sure you add chain to the other end of your bracelet. This part is where you have to be very careful to push your beads up against your clasp very carefully, making sure the tail end of your wire is tucked inside. I'm just pushing them nice and tight. Next, you're going to go ahead and put your last crimp bead on your wire and make sure it is right up against the seed beads. And then once again, you're going to loop your stringing wire back through the crimp. I made certain that I put the wire through several of my end beads as well as the crimp bead. And then I went ahead and adjusted my loop size by tugging on the end of the wire. Next, of course, I made sure it was the right size, and I picked up my flat nose pliers once again and smashed that crimp bead. So to finish it up, I once again picked up and snipped off the extra wire. It really is best if you use wire cutters for this part, but I only had scissors at hand, so whatever you have will in fact work. And then, of course, you have a finished bracelet. Ta-da! So for earrings with the jump ring, I just took my finished earring and placed it directly onto my jump ring. And then I put the jump ring directly onto the bottom of my ear wire, and then I closed the jump ring with my flat nose pliers. You can also attach the loops directly to an ear wire, which I will show you in a second. It depends on how you want the loop to lay. And that is Mr. Hayes. He is the namesake on my bracelet, and he was just photobombing us. As you can tell, I was doing this when we were working from home. Now, I didn't show you everything about making the earrings because it's the exact same process as the bracelet, but I did start off with 6-inch wires for both sets of earrings. And remember, the shorter your message, the smaller your loop is going to be, so it just depends on what size you want. So on this, I went ahead and I used my flat nose pliers to open the bottom of an ear wire, and then I put my loops directly onto the bottom of the ear wire, and then I picked up my flat nose pliers again, and I went ahead and I closed it. So this just makes an earring that hangs a little differently than the other ones. It depends on whether you want it to be more like a regular earring or whether you really want to showcase your message. It's totally up to you. It's just whatever your personal preference is. Thank you so much. This is where I would usually promote my upcoming programs, but instead I'll ask that you check out my digital escape games. Escape the Sphinx is a family game designed for ages 10 and up. You have to test your wits against the Sphinx. Escape the Tomb was designed for ages 6 to 11 and is also fun for the whole family. I've had adults who love this game. Not surprisingly, you have to escape an ancient Egyptian tomb. Lastly, we have Classical Chaos, the escape game designed for teens and adults. Your vacation to Greece has taken a terrible turn and you have to escape an ancient Greek labyrinth. I hope you really enjoyed our Morse code jewelry demo and that you'll check out some of our other great digital programs we have online or come visit us at the library. Thanks!